Episode 7 of Pluribus is arriving next week, and after the end of episode 6, we have many questions surrounding what we will see next with both Carol and Manousos. Based on previous hints and going through multiple angles with which the show might go in, I think I have an idea of what we might see happen in episode 7 and a good sense of what could be coming during the rest of season 1. So in this video, I'm going to be discussing my predictions and theories for Pluribus episode 7 and beyond. Before I get into it though, if you want to see much more content on Vince Gilligan's Pluribus, then don't forget to support this upload by giving it a like rating and subscribing to the channel. But without further ado, let's dive into my latest predictions and theories for Vince Gilligan's Pluribus. So after the end of Pluribus episode 5, many of us are left with some big questions going into next week's episode. On one hand, Carol thinks that she has reasserted her autonomy, finding out that the Hive won't force her to join because of the procedure in which they would have to undertake. On the other hand, Manousos, previously secluded and disconnected, finally decides to take action. They've both chosen resistance, one by refusing assimilation, and the other by deciding to fight back rather than hide. Coming to episode 7, the title of the new episode is The Gap, and we do get a brief description on Apple TV. The description of the gap reads, Manousos begins a dangerous trek to meet Carol, and returning home from Las Vegas, Carol gets creative with her rebellion. Now in regards to that gap title, I think like HDP, this could refer to multiple things. And in talking about each of my predictions and theories for the next episode, I'm going to discuss about each of those meanings throughout. Starting with the primary reference point for this title, I think it refers to the Darien Gap within Manousos' road trip from Paraguay to Albuquerque. Before leaving on his so-called trip to Albuquerque, Manousos pulled together a mix of supplies. He took food from his cupboards, extra clothes, a portable radio, paper maps covering Peru, Bolivia, Paraguay, New Mexico and Guatemala, some cash and fuel for the car, and what looks like a large knife. He also included in his supplies a yellow book with a photo of a man and woman on the cover, and the words on it read, Sueños con fluidez. Translated, the text essentially means, learn while you drive, horizons in English, and dreams with fluency. In short, it's material meant to help Manousos practice English during his long drive. So clearly, during his journey towards Carol, he's going to learn English so that he can communicate with her. I think this could also be him learning more quickly so that he can potentially send her a message during that long journey. If he's able to do this, he could let her know that he saw her recording, that he's on his way towards her location, and that he aligns with her feelings towards what's happening. Manousos getting in contact with her would essentially be a way of giving her some hope in that she's not alone in her thoughts about the hive mind. Anyway, coming back to his journey, it is possible to drive from Paraguay to Albuquerque, but a big hurdle is the gap in the road between Colombia and Panama. The Darien Gap, which is what I think is the primary reference point for episode 7's title, is a wild isolated stretch of jungle that separates Panama from Colombia. With no roads and a reputation for extreme danger, it forms the only land link between Central and South America. Despite its risks of thick rainforests, swampy terrain, and threatening wildlife, it has become a major, often deadly passageway for migrants heading towards North America. So it sounds like a terrible journey, but I guess you gotta give Manousos the credit for making this long trip. But anyway, I think a lot of this episode and the next few with Manousos is going to be getting over this Darien Gap so that he can have a smoother journey towards Carol. And while making this trip, we'd have to expect that he might come in contact with more of the joined, and we don't know what they will say or throw his way during that time. What we do know is that during the journey he's going to be trying to learn English and potentially looking deeper into his frequencies he noted down using that portable radio that he brought with him. Before we move over to Carol and still sticking with Manousos, I wanted to discuss what we could be seeing with that radio frequency that he discovered and why I think this could be another link to that Gap title. As we learnt previously with Manousos, he'd been staying isolated, scanning radio frequencies out of a storage container office. In the latest episode, he continued through wide ranges of frequencies, searching for any anomaly, whether it's a pattern, rhythm, or a tone that stands out from the static. He finally found one number that was a question point, an uncrossed number or frequency referenced as 86130. On this frequency, Manousos consistently picks up a strange rhythmic signal sounding like pulses, clicks, or a hum that doesn't behave like conventional radio noise. To him, this rhythmic frequency is more than random static, as it feels like some kind of communication, or at least a coded signal possibly tied to how the hive mind coordinates. I think this could be suggesting that the psychic glue of the hive isn't just some pure telepathy or supernatural bond, but something that is more tangible with radio or high frequency waves. In that case, 86130 could be the technical channel through which the other's collective consciousness exchanges information and pulses that sync massive numbers of minds. And bringing this back to the potential multiple meanings of the episode 7 title, the gap might be referring to that gap in numbers that Manousos hasn't crossed out. Maybe later on in season 1 or even further down the line, if he does eventually meet up with Carol, maybe he knows more about this signal and how it might be a frequency that the hive uses to communicate to all those who have been joined. Maybe Manousos and Carol might eventually plot to interrupt this signal somehow and give themselves a chance to reverse the joining. Now, of course, while I don't think that would be as easy as it sounds, and there's a chance they may not permanently disable it, they still might find a way to temporarily disrupt it. And as Manousos did pack a portable radio and take his book of numbers with him, he is definitely planning to find out more about this frequency. So it will be really interesting to find out what that frequency really is, and as I say, I think it is going to be a big key to disrupting the hive mind's communication and the signal between all the joined. Coming now to Carol, while Manousos is going to be solving a challenging journey of both literal and metaphorical gaps, I think that she is going to be dealing with her own kind of gap. And this involves the gap between her and the hive mind, who have continued to stay away from her, potentially leaving her quite lonely. In episode 6, while Carol was holding back tears in Kumba's hotel suite toilet, he phones someone and speaks about how Carol is quite lonely. Based on the way he was talking, it sounds like he was speaking to a joined woman who'd been giving him everything he wanted. I think this idea of Carol feeling increasingly lonely is going to play into the next few episodes because there are a couple of signs that point towards it. The question though is how that sense of loneliness will be felt and used by Carol. Well, in the promo footage we've seen of Carol, footage that hasn't been seen in the episodes that have aired, she is mainly on her own and she doesn't look too upset. There's footage of her howling back at the coyote house at night and her setting off what looks to be fireworks around her cul-de-sac. I think the howling scene is definitely going to be in the next episode, as the clothes she wears in that scene are the same ones that she was wearing at the end of the last episode. The reason I'm focusing on this idea of Carol's loneliness is because of a recent tease that some fans have found online. Before episode 6 aired, a Reddit user posted a Google Earth snapshot showing the cul-de-sac where Carol lives, an area Vince Gilligan said was constructed specifically for the series. If you search for a particular set of coordinates on Google Earth, you can see a view of her cul-de-sac set from during the production of the series. And switching to historical imagery and rewinding to 2024 reveals the phrase "come back" painted in white on the pavement in front of Carol's house. This seems aimed at the hive, suggesting that she is trying to get their attention back after they cut ties with her. We also know that the others rely on drones and that the hive have been monitoring Carol from 40,000 feet above. So if she wanted to reach out to them, then this would be a pretty inventive way to get that message across. Now, in coming back to my theory of Carol being lonely and what this ultimately means, well, I question, is she actually feeling lonely, and why would she be feeling so down after the reveal in episode 6 of her having final say over the joints turning her? Well, I think that she might be using this loneliness situation as a plan for what comes next. I think she'll use her loneliness as a way to get the others back. It would reflect the description of the episode in that she gets creative with her rebellion, and essentially she'd appear desperate to them and act like she wants to change and have a reconnection. But in reality, she wants them and Zosha back so that she can plot her next move. What I'm leading to with all of this is a theory on how Season 1 might all end up. And it all connects back to the hint we got last week with that Agatha Christie book, And Then There Were None, which was lying on Carol's bedside table. Now, Christie's story is built around an isolated group cut off from the outside world, slowly realising that someone among them is manipulating events. In the novel, the setting appears safe as a beautiful island retreat, but is actually a trap. Christie's plot relies on the idea that someone within the group is not who they appear to be. The book kills characters off one by one, and the author's story revolves around punishing characters for hidden past crimes. Her book is also famous for its twist explanation that reframes everything. Until the final confession, the reader assumes that the killer must still be alive, that someone is lying about their identity, or that there's some unseen person on the island. But the twist in fact shows that the killer was dead for half of the book, and that every assumption the characters and reader made was based on a false premise. And it also made clear that the entire situation was a controlled psychological experiment in justice and guilt. Now, I don't think that Pluribus is reflecting that story beat for beat, but I do think that it is a metaphorical hint towards what will happen, especially the idea that the entire situation was a controlled psychological experiment in justice and guilt. As I began to go into last week, I think it may be hinting that the Hive is being truthful about what's been happening. In episode 3, Zosha said to Carol that they were throwing her a life preserver and that they couldn't protect the unjoined from each other. They took over by asserting happiness, they cannot lie, and they believe that the world is better this way. Now yes, the show could go in the direction of a rug pull and frame everything in the context of the Hive being evil and manipulating the whole ordeal to achieve something. But I think that all the signs we've been getting actually point to them being quite truthful in their own weird way. So with all this in mind, I'm sticking with the idea I presented last week that the real villain is actually humanity itself and the foreshadowing doom of the old world before the Hive took over. The final episode title of Season 1 is La Chica o El Mundo, which translates to The Girl or the World. In knowing that, I think Carol manipulates the Hive into reconnecting in the next episode, and then eventually allowing for a meeting to take place between her, Zosha, and all the other unjoined characters. I think Carol will claim that this is to reconnect with them, to apologise, and to turn a corner, but in reality, it's to take action against them with her new plan. And I think that new plan involves convincing the other unjoined characters that someone like Zosha can have full individuality again. With potential Manousos help using his questioned radio frequency, I think Zosha is going to be given agency again when they disrupt the Hive's signal. But in reaction to this demonstration, I think the other unjoined characters will still reject going back to how things were in the old world. I think only Carol and Manousos will want this to happen, and because they don't get their own way in swaying the other unjoined characters, it creates a conflicting rift between all of them. That would reflect the motifs of the Christie book, and like I said last week, it would give us a reason for what this whole Pluribus thing has been about. In reflecting that mention in the Christie book of a controlled psychological experiment in justice and guilt, I think Pluribus is an experiment to try and get the remainder of humanity to work together. I think humanity was already heading towards doom in the old world, hence the life preserver comment from Zosha, and the hive mind approach is a test to try and help steer the world away from that doom. I think Carol and Manousos completely reject this ideology and think the Hive is doing all of this to strip away their individuality. But ultimately, I think Pluribus is an experiment to try and help a dying species that couldn't get along. And the end of Season 1 will demonstrate how tough a task this will be, especially when Carol and Manousos are actively trying to reverse what happened and the unjoined go against each other because of it. It's just a theory, but I do think it would be a much smarter way of dealing with the show's central themes and ideas, rather than just the Hive being completely evil and glossing it over. But they were my thoughts and predictions for Pluribus episode 7 and the rest of season 1. I can't wait for next week's episode to arrive, and I'm expecting a very intriguing end to this first season. But what are your predictions and theories surrounding what happens in the next episode and the rest of season 1? Let me know down below in the comment section. For much more videos on Vince Gilligan's Pluribus, then subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications. Also, if you enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like rating and follow me on social media via the links in the description. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I've been Cortex, and as always, make some noise.